No flooding down here though, right?
No.
Just the wind, no water. We have wind and water up north. It's rough. It's intense. You ready to go? All right. So that's Tim. Now we are officially live. We were before, it was just something that was happening. So anyway, first of all, my name is Ratigan, and I just wanted to thank all of you for coming and giving me a chance to say hello and talk to you and hear your questions and offer you a little bit of a sense about who I am, why I'm doing this, and what I intend to accomplish in the process, or at least what I intend to offer as an option for representation for us in the district. In summary, I was born in Saranac Lake, raised in Saranac Lake, graduated from Saranac Lake High School. I went to college just south of the district, Union College, so in Schenectady, and then after that moved to New York. I worked for about a decade for Bloomberg, and I was actually a member of the last training class for Mike Bloomberg's company, where it was a small company and he ran the training classes. And after that, it sort of growing really fast. And he used to be really complimentary to all the new employees. He'd be like, "Oh, welcome, where are you from? Oh, you're from Saranac Lake or wherever." And he'd make you feel really good. And then he'd look at you and be like, "This company was running really well before you showed up. So please don't blank it up," was his line. So anyway, but the reason that's relevant is because it really was my education in finance, financial policy, economic policy, all those things. When I became a host at CNBC, I was a little bit different than a lot of the other people that were working there because I had a pretty in-depth background in corporate finance. So I came as a corporate finance person into journalism and broadcasting, as opposed to being a broadcaster who was talking about money. And so it was a different perspective. It wasn't really that relevant until the financial crisis. When the financial crisis happened, it was extremely clear and explicit to me that what was happening was a legitimate theft and cover-up, in a way that was being blamed on homeowners, borrowers. There was this whole thing with like, "Oh, if you just didn't buy a house, this never would have happened." Well, no. Like, you made a decision in 1998, 1999, 2001, I can point to the legislation, to open up a financial system that was intended to create this outcome, and in the process take money and resources out of places like upstate New York, and really across the country, and consolidate that money into banks and tall buildings in cities around the world, in computers. And at the same time, I'm the only child of a single mother. My mother was working mental health, like Essex County Mental Health in Lake Placid. And so while I'm front row to the financial crisis in New York, I'm seeing the explicit consequences of the intensity of the struggle of the money that's the money and resources that's flowing out of upstate New York and districts like it across the country, at the same time that I'm seeing where it is going. It was at that moment where I quit that job. And I quit that job in order explicitly to begin what has now ended up with a congressional run, which is why we're here today. But 10 years ago, I started a career basically in political reform. And that began with 3 years at MSNBC. I went to MSNBC basically because it was the only way that I could get direct access to every sitting member of our government every day and ask them questions. And because I had the opportunity to do that, I was like, well, that's obviously the best use of time. After 3 years of that, and in the process of that, I became somewhat famously frustrated. If you Google my name and the word rant, you can occasionally find a few comments about a few things from time to time. And one of the consequences of that, though, was the formation of a group called Get Money Out. Basically, it became very clear to me, because we'd argue about education, and we'd say, well, why is there not local control of education? I was on that desk during the entire healthcare debate. Why are we not at least having we already provide universal or widely, totally accessible healthcare to everybody in this country over 65 and every veteran in this country. We talk about healthcare as an accessible thing as if it's this boogie. We're like, how can we possibly figure out how to do this? Well, no. We're already doing this. This is not some grand invention. And so watching the fact that wasn't put into the ACA, I can go through every single issue and watching how those are resolved. And there's an instinct where you say, oh, it's a referendum on the leadership. Barack Obama didn't do a good job. The Republicans screwed us over, whatever the language is. But really, the people who are financing the campaigns are dictating the policy really on both sides of the aisle with moderate biases and bending where it can be done. But when it comes to large banks, when it comes to large pharmaceuticals companies, when it comes to the military, when it comes to the real things that we want to talk about and reform and improve, it's sealed up by the campaign finance system, and then power is retained through the gerrymandering, which creates a situation where 90% of the time the incumbent politician in every district keeps their job. I mean, we're in a sort of classic gerrymander here. We're lucky because we're not that severely gerrymandered. This is a winnable district. This can be done. We're in the process of doing this. But look at just how we function. You have New York 19 in the Hudson Valley. You have New York 20, which is the Albany, Schenectady, and then you have New York 21, where we are. New York 20 gets carved to be for the Democrats, include the and then New York 21 and New York 19 goes to the Republicans. And it's a deal. And reforming things like that to create, so people say, oh, we need term limits. Well, elections are supposed to be term limits. But if the election doesn't function to naturally empower us to change our leadership, well, then you start to look for rules. You're like, well, since the voting is not working, we'll come up with a rule that works. But the rule is always going to end up being more problems than it's worth. At the end of the day, at the very least, I feel like political reform is about reconnecting the voter with the government in the way campaign finance is dealt with, and in the way that redistricting is dealt with, and for that matter, in the way that we vote, which is a whole other conversation we can talk about, ranked voting and that sort of thing. And so a decade of this experience on political reform was sort of defining for me. Each time I would go a little further, so I was like, oh, well, do journalism, and I was like, oh, I'll write a book. And I was like, oh, we'll start a political activist group we'll put 300,000, 400,000 people together working on campaign finance reform. It's getting worse, I'm like, I'll quit completely. I'll take my money that I've saved up and I'll try to start something that really means something, which is solar-powered hydroponic farming kits that can give veterans jobs, because if the government's not going to do it, at least we can create small farms everywhere and go 100% renewable, and we'll just do it. Well, unfortunately, I don't have that much power. In other words, I have done some solar-powered hydroponic farming, but the rate at which I can replicate those solar-powered hydroponic farms is sadly much too slow relative to what needs to happen in the world as it's shifting right now. And at the same time, I feel like our politics continues to get more and more and more broken, as opposed to less and less broken. And when I watched that tax debate last December, and remember, we are the most powerful economy on the planet Earth, which is really just amount of horsepower. Our capacity to do really, 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 really great things and really, 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 really awful things is more than anybody else in the world. And so when you have that much power, there's a level of responsibility and seriousness that has to be used to custody of that. And when you do a tax bill that is designed to punish and reward political allies, as opposed to designed to actually create a flow of money that creates value for people, it's never going to be perfect, but at least pretend to have a conversation that says, well, how do we create more investment, more money in distribution in our society, as a part of a political conversation that right now in every category puts human beings last, right? So let's pick an issue, education. Teachers and students are the lowest priority participants in every ultimate decision that's made in education. That the decisions are made based on what does Pearson, the testing company, want, because Pearson is giving money to the political candidates, but the students and the parents and the teachers are not. I mean, that's the teachers are, but the students and the teachers individually are not. Healthcare is the best example. You have doctors, nurses, and patients. And all of our healthcare policy is driven by pharmaceutical companies, health insurance companies, hospital operation companies. And so there's no greater symptom of a broken government, which we pay for with our tax money and we vote for, although our vote has been buffered by gerrymandering and campaign finance, so it's less threatening to the power structure right now. But still, in principle, that's what we're doing. And in the process of doing all of that, we're getting a government that, rather than prioritizing any decision-making based on who a person is based on prioritizing assets and financing at the expense of human beings. And so, for me, all of that came together for me to really motivate me to, again, offer myself up as a potential candidate to represent us in Congress starting next year, as a way for me to take what I know and have learned in my life, having grown up and graduated from Saranac Lake High School and having been back up here since 2012, moving around to do this farming business and then using Lake Placid as home base. And then at the same time leverage the expertise that I've been able to accumulate on finance and political reform especially, and bring a loud, very clear voice on our behalf as a district into the Congress on day one that will allow us to really move forward. I think that the instinct is there's a desire to go back in life in general, and there's a desire to go back certainly in our political culture. It's impossible. But what is possible is to amend the present to create the future that we want. And the opportunity we have this year, whether it's in our district or in this election across the country, is to move in the direction of what we want. And what we want is very simple. We need to reform a broken political system. This is not rocket science. It's not a left-right issue. This is it. We must have total access to health care immediately. There's 1,000 things to talk about, but it is an inexcusable, it's a non-issue. And we have to have meaningful infrastructure and economic development in our district. Those things are simple. Everything else to me, and you can go through it, we can talk about this, I'll stop my comments, you guys can ask questions, but whether you're talking about education, if you're talking about equality, if you're talking about the environment, if you're talking about women's rights, if you're talking about gun rights, if you're talking about all the sort of this traditional conversations, the quality of the solution that's available to us is only as good as our ability to influence the way that our campaigns are financed and the way that we vote, because that is the foundation upon which the conversation shifts. And so, because I talk so much about the broken political system and the need for reform, and then infrastructure and health, people get concerned. I don't know if you saw, there was a thing that I wasn't able to make it to the environmental forum in Glens Falls. I don't know if you guys saw a week or two ago. And all of a sudden people went into panic. They're like, I think he's anti-environment. They're like, I really liked him, but I think he's anti-tree. And I'm like, no, don't mistake my lack of presence at a particular forum on a particular night as an indication that I don't like trees. In fact, if you're concerned about my feeling on trees, I did leave my career to create a solar-powered hydroponic farming kit in order to go to 100% renewable infrastructure. And so you sort of navigate our way through all that, and it's in the ability to sit in a room like this with you and talk, and then I'll be quiet now and take questions, is a huge privilege. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here and for giving me a chance to have a little bit of this conversation with you. And fire away.
Dylan, I'm not going to be quiet.
Good.
I don't want you to be quiet either.
All right.
But what do you need each one of us to do for you in this election so you will win? We need specifics.
Yeah, I can be extremely specific. So you better be careful.
We want you to win.
So there is a person in this room whose name is Stuart. Stuart, would you raise your hand?
Raise your hand, Stuart.
That's Stuart. Some of you may have emailed with Stuart. Some of you may have talked to Stuart. Some of you may have done all different Stuart interactions. Stuart has the resources that I'm about to talk about. But here's what we need. First and foremost, we need people to do the things that they enjoy doing. So I'm going to talk about making phone calls, I'll talk about writing letters, I'm going to talk about social media, parties like this. The mistake we make is we're like, oh, everybody's got to make phone calls. Well, guess what? At least half the people, if not more, hate making phone calls. And it's the worst experience they've ever had in their entire life. They're like, oh, I really liked doing this until I had to make phone calls, and now I'm out. Right? So if you don't like making phone calls, you should not make phone calls. Right? That's like a rule for living. Okay? But if you do like making phone calls, you should get in touch with Stuart, and Stuart will get you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone numbers for people for you to call. Now, I don't like making phone calls, okay? And we've had people come in and they're like, I'll take 300 numbers. I look at them, I'm like, that guy's gonna take 300 numbers? Incomprehensible to me, but some people, they like the phone. So one is, if you like the phone, Stuart will get you a list of phone numbers. So if you don't like the phone, but you still want to be able to support this, you write a letter. And Stuart has can help you with that. And that letter gets published digitally and then can be mailed on your behalf to other registered voters in the district. And so the letter is some people like, we have teachers in Plattsburgh, they're like, I'm going to write 500 letters. I'm like, that's unbelievable. I mean, they're not going to write 500 letters, we're going to print them out and sign them, but you know what I'm saying. So letters is number 2. There are 3 social media links that Nancy, who's sitting on the floor here, has been circulating. So if you're into the internet side of things, she's your link dealer for the Facebook pages of the world and all the rest of that. And then, you know what my number 1 is? How many yard signs do you think you can get out for us? How about 500? I was talking to a woman up in Ogdensburg yesterday, and she works at one of the big vineyards up in Thousand Islands. And we were talking. I was like, we need to get 100 yard signs, like in between all the grapes, you know, just the whole way down the vineyard. And she said, well, I can't vote for you because I'm Canadian, and she works there. And it was at the wine. I was like, I didn't ask for your vote. I just need you to put yard signs all over the vineyard. So we got specific requests. But anyway, so if there are people like, there's a group in Watertown where they know all they literally are like, get us 300 yard signs, because they're all the small businesses in Watertown and up and down Arsenal Avenue. So everybody has different relationships, skills, interests, all those sorts of things. So, but yard signs, and then old school door knocking and parties. And so whatever your preference is, that's something to indicate to Stuart, and he can then basically get you what you need. Stuart and Nancy can get you what you need. But that was kind of a super softball question.
Yes, it was.
And now we're talking. Thank you.
Hi, Dylan. I've actually met you a couple of times.
Oh, great.
And I had the pleasure of hearing you present several times.
Okay.
And I couldn't agree with you more, as I'm sure a lot of people in this room agree with you that campaign reform and finance reform and campaign reform is extremely important in this country. But a lot of that seems kind of pie in the sky to me.
Uh-huh.
So, were you to make it to Washington?
Yeah.
I understand that the freshman class of congressmen and congresswomen don't necessarily have choice on what committees they would like to serve on.
Yeah.
They are told.
Yeah.
You can put in a request,
Yeah.
but basically you're told. In a perfect world, if you were given the choice,
Finance.
okay.
That's my
Thank you.
background.
So,
And then yeah.
all right, so day 1,
Mm-hmm.
you're allowed to serve on the finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
What is your plan for CD 21 specifically?
Explicit 2 ways. On the Finance Committee, using the platform and convening power of the Congressional Office to directly advance awareness and development of our revenue per cow, revenue per apple, revenue per megawatt, revenue per hotel room, revenue per student bed. Imagine a dashboard that actually shows what those numbers are, and then we'll put the negative numbers up there too. Cost per drug addict, cost per unemployed person, and we'll have that as a shared dashboard. And I will manage that dashboard as a way for you to decide how I am doing, but I can't do it without you anyway, so who are we kidding? We are going to have to do that as a singular thing. The other thing is, because half the district is not on internet, you would publish that same dashboard in every paper every week. So imagine day 1 you have the dashboard, revenue per cow, revenue per apple, hotel, down the thing, and you have an analog version of that that's also being published. That's 1. 2, immediate advocacy of an infrastructure bank in the country that can then be driven into the infrastructure of New York 21 and drive the shift that we're all undergoing from the Eisenhower infrastructure, which has served us extremely well and was built with an infrastructure bank, into the new infrastructure, which is where we are headed right now as a country, and the longer we wait to do it, the more risk we incur. So I would do the dashboard with the specific economic development targets, and then use the position on the Finance Committee to advance a very loud voice for an infrastructure bank.
Thank you.
I need a harder question. That was good. That was harder. That was harder. That was harder. I mean,
How do you propose to beat Elise?
Elise is imminently beatable for the simple fact that she is a poster child for the incumbent politician who has never worked a real job in their lives. You have a situation right now where you have someone whose entire career is predicated on going from an internship in college into a career in politics, that they were then placed into a position effectively by an establishment apparatus. Our entire campaign is based on reforming a broken political system. The opportunity to run against an incumbent who is the poster child for a broken political system is thrilling for me. Understand that I am not, this is not a career move for me. I'm not 29 or 30 years old looking to make my career as a politician at all. I'm somebody who's been working for political reform for a decade, any which way I can get at it. I'll make it the Get Money Out thing. We'll go to Maine and do ranked choice voting. We'll make a farming system. We'll write a book. Run for Congress, straight at it, belly of the beast, and do it in a way that advocates these very explicit things. My dream would be, so let's say we have this economic dashboard, and I'm not answering your question totally, but imagine we have this dashboard. I answered your question, but I'll come back to that. And now let's say a couple years go by, 2 years, 4 years go by, and you're like, you know what, Ratigan, you're not doing a very good job with that thing. I'm like, okay. You think the Clem can do it better? Let him run the dashboard for a couple of years, right? But because the thing is, it's not just that we're running for Congress or representing NY-21 or all this. We have a broken political system. Part of a broken political system is there is no measurement of any key performance indicators of any kind on any politician for anything. Not just economically, socially, and culturally. It doesn't matter. Ever so everybody says things and nothing happens. There is a reason no politician wants to have a dashboard like that. Because it'll mess up their career. This is not my career. We have a real problem in this country. I have a particular life experience that's a little weird that I didn't even entirely plan, that was this finance thing that led into this politics thing. And I believe that I can bring it to bear in a very clear and effective way on behalf of this district, which I have a unique relationship with, because not only is it my home, but it's my family's home going back to the 1750s. So there's a specific relationship with this part of the world, and quite honestly, and this is terrible because I'm on Facebook Live right now, so I got to be careful what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm sick and tired of Quebec and Vermont using upstate New York as a back office for their production. When you look at our economy, where do you think Vermont cheddar cheese is made? Ratigan. So Vermont's taking all our cheese money, and we're making all the cheese. You want to talk about a bad deal, right? And so you can go down those lists. Those are real specific things. Con Edison in New York would love nothing more than to sell renewable power to the 30 million people in New York City. It's much more marketable. It's better for them. Can't do it. They're buying renewable power from Vermont and then marketing it down there. There's no reason they can't be buying it from us. So there are things that are very practical. Saranac Lake was more famous than Lake Placid when the 1980 Olympics happened. It was way more famous than Lake Placid in the 1932 Olympics happened because it was a center for wellness under Dr. Trudeau before they really cured tuberculosis. But the idea of marketing the wellness aspects, as somebody, I know you're a Saranac Lake fan, so we could put you in the commercial. And you can be out there selling Saranac Lake to the world. 3 flights a day to Boston. So anyway, so that's the sort of thing that I think is, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have another question. Actually, I'm going to continue this evening representing those individuals that I know are in this room that have not yet made up their mind.
Great.
So I am not interested in how you're going to be Elise. I'm not interested in what we need to do to get you there.
Yeah.
Because I know that there are people here
Sure.
that have not yet made up their mind.
Of course, I would hope so.
They're going to vote for us. So I'm going to continue to ask more pointed questions.
Go for it.
To help those individuals.
Did they ask you to do this, or are you just doing this on your own volition?
No one asked me.
Louisville.
I think it's just the school.
I'm teasing you. Have at it.
I'm going to ask you what your position is on gun control, and I'm going to caution you not to begin your answer with,
Pro Second Amendment?
please don't do that.
I'm sorry.
Because every politician is doing that. Well, first I want to say I support the Second Amendment, but really you support all the amendments. So don't start.
No. There's some amendments I don't really like. I'm very selective with which amendments I'll support. All right. So
I really am a nice person.
I believe you. I believe you. So as far as guns are very simple, okay? Sporting weapons inside this make complete sense to me. I have no issue with them whatsoever. I personally enjoy them. I was saying to these guys, we were out on a farm in Ogdensburg yesterday, shooting targets and shooting trap, and I've been, duck hunting, all those sorts of things. So when I say I support the Second Amendment, what I mean is the Second Amendment protection for those weapons is extremely rational, makes sense to me. It's something I enjoy. It's obvious we need background checks. There are obvious fixes that are not being done that are obvious, and we will advocate for obvious reasons.
Like what?
Like what? Universal background checks, the gun show loophole, bump stocks. I mean, there's stuff that's a layup along the way.
What about magazines?
Magazine size, absolutely. I mean, there are a bunch of obvious things. I mean, the funniest thing, you guys, I don't know how many people shoot, but there's so many rules about which bullet. You're like, oh, well, you can't use this particular bullet because if you use this bullet, like you can't even use buckshot for certain things because it's so you can use a slug or you can use birdshot. So it's so funny to me that we can't have any rules about guns, but we do have rules about whether you can use buckshot or birdshot or slugs when you go, there's 1,000 rules for guns right now. And so it's something that is I think there's a bigger, if you really want to get into this whole thing, you're really talking as much about because of the level of insecurity, the level of insecurity that exists, especially with the economic shift over the past 30 or 40 years and its impact on young men especially, has been significant. And I believe that there's a huge opportunity for us to harness a lot of that young male energy that doesn't know where to go a lot and really drive it at the sort of reform and the sort of infrastructure that we're talking about, the sort of things that we actually can do. And I think we make a mistake when we try to ignore those energies or try to diminish those energies. They exist. They need to be harnessed and directed at things that are valuable for us. Yeah, go ahead up front here. Sorry, guys. Hi, Sue.
How you doing? I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm listening to you. I'm having a white male meltdown.
I'm sorry.
I
apologize.
I'm sorry, but maybe it's a Trump effect or something. So I know you've got some interesting ladies who are opposing you. Tell me why I like you better than that, maybe.
So, the only reason that we can overcome my unfortunate condition.
I'm sorry.
And I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for this, okay? This is just what happened. I showed up this way.
I know.
It wasn't my fault.
I'm just sorry. Is it just me, though?
No, but I think it's more important to talk about it than not.
Yeah.
The only reason that you would really consider overlooking the obvious impairment that I bring into this situation is if you believe that a meaningful, really loud, known voice who's already known in Washington, D.C., of a person who is one of the most outspoken political reformers in the country with an expertise in money and political reform is somebody that you would like to have represent you. Right? There are a lot of politicians. There's only one person in this race or any race in America right now who has that specific expertise in money and political reform and the background to back it up through action, not through words. And so if you see that and you can get over the major impairment.
Okay.
So that's what I would,
Open mind.
I mean, so in other words, when it comes to the issues, women's rights, I'm so tired of talking about defending the line on rights, whether it's on whether it's on race and gender equality or whatever. We are in the process here of building momentum to move forward. We shouldn't be defending Planned Parenthood budgets. It's a ridiculous conversation. We need to be advancing women's health, women's education, women's small business, so that we're moving the point is to move the line forward. And I would say the other reason to consider me relative to potentially any of your other potential representatives is it is a short-run 2-year time frame. A freshman congressperson has a limited amount of leverage when they show up as it is. I'm the only person in the race who is widely known by every single person there, and they don't want me to come.
Amen.
And so that's a unique opportunity as well. Back here and then right here. Go ahead, yeah.
So, having the privilege of having you at my home
Yeah.
and doing a meet and greet, I talked to many people in our district
Yeah.
about saying come and meet him, Democrats and Republicans, and just the lay people of the area. And people that are not super informed talk about, oh, who is he running against? Who's the incumbent? When I say elite, it's against the Elise Stefanik. Like, oh, I don't like her because she did not have a lot of access to the people.
She wasn't here.
So what's your commitment and what is your idea about doing, like Kirsten Gillibrand used to do Congress on the corner
Yeah.
and things like that. What is
So what do you want my? So here's my
What's
preference.
yours?
So I called one of the campaign advisors in Washington D.C. about a month and a half ago, and I said, when I win this, do I have to come to Washington D.C.? I said, what if I ran this? What if I represented a district as a representative of the district who lived in the district, and then I go to Washington D.C. when I need to? And that is actually my preference. Now, because there is no apparent reason why they're even there for 40 weeks, quite honestly. Right? Like this whole thing is, remember, our government is broken. Part of what our government being broken is, right now we have a bunch of people that live in Washington D.C. and then do fly-ins once in a while and then really they only connect with the people that they quote unquote represent during the campaign with a message that's a poll-tested manipulation that's really based on trying to destroy the other person in any way possible. Right? As long as I can make you think that whoever my opponent is an axe murderer or a man, a white man. You got this thing sewn up, right? And so really my preference is to run it, my first choice would be to run it from here and spend as little time there as possible. There is something to be said for a balance in that, but for me, I'm somebody who has been able to live in travel in 35 or 40 countries and cities over the course of the past 25 years. I have never chosen Washington D.C. as one of them. So Washington D.C. is a necessary place to go in order to do work that has to be done right now, but the work that has to be done right now is work that's being done on behalf of upstate New York, not on behalf of Washington D.C.
So you will pledge to do Congress on your corners or something?
I will pledge to do a series of Facebook Lives and town halls before I vote. Because I'm supposed to represent a vote last I checked.
Yeah.
The idea is not what do I think, and then I go down there and vote whatever I vote and then come back up here and manipulate you guys into thinking that was a good idea. Last I checked, that's not representation. So forget Congress on your corner. I will commit to at least 2 or 3 town halls and 2 or 3 Facebook Lives before any vote. And I'll say, how do you want me to vote? And I'll say, here's how I think we should vote on this. I'm your congressperson. Here's a body of information. Here's my point of view. Here's what I think. And you can say, no, I don't think so. Why not? And then we can say, well, what vote do you guys want me to represent on this one? Because at last I checked, the job is being a representative. Isn't that what the job is? Like, I feel like people have lost, like, that's what this job, and so for me, I feel like the way you're a representative is, one, what are you managing? Have the dashboard. How are you going to measure me? Or whoever the representative, it doesn't matter, I'm one of 1,000, right? And then what does that job look like? That job looks like you work from the district, whatever the district is, and you talk to the people that you represent before you vote. To me, it's kind of, it's staggering to me that this is like considered an idea. Like that we don't already do that. So
It only works if you get the bill early enough to actually read it.
No, I know, broken government. I mean, I got it, believe me, sorry.
You know, we've had 25 years or more of Fox News and the drumbeat about regulation, but a lot of what you're interested in does require a lot of regulation. And the message out there is any regulation is bad. In fact, all of us live with it.
Sure, rules are bad.
Rules are bad. So how are you going to break through a very, resistant constituency that has had this drumbeat with no real understanding that it's counterproductive
Yeah.
to...
So the answer to your question is I'm not, okay? The way you win this election is by enrolling the other 70% of the people.
Yeah.
And so the thing with with communication or anything like this is you have a finite number of resources that you can either devote to arguing with those that are the most against you.
But they're very loud.
Listen, me too. Google me. Or working with the 70% of the people that are there, and everybody responds to the principle of fairness. And the biggest distinction that I'm finding right now because there's a huge, don't tell anybody, but there's a huge group of Republicans for Ratigan. It's a secret group, but they're very operational because they are also frustrated with a broken political system, right? And so it's remarkable how many people I have they're like, philosophically, we're 100%. They're like, ideologically, I don't agree with anything you think. But philosophically, I agree with you 100%. And that is a meaningful point of connection. And also the combination of that and actually having somebody who is a child of a place like Saranac Lake who can offer the ability to do the representation with these things is attractive to a lot of those folks. I've actually there are a lot of conservative party members who are very supportive of us. We have a lot of folks, some even in this room, who are not Democrats, but are working aggressively on our behalf right now.
What do you think are some of the talking points for, not so much again, either side, but those independents who really could sway either way, that we could encourage them to really,
Well,
come along
nobody
and
believes the
follow?
political system is more broken than an independent.
Absolutely. My
And-
mother is one.
Yeah.
She,
And so when you have somebody who is running, explicitly validating that person's point of view, which is what I am and what we are doing, and not only doing that, but somebody who's dedicated a decade of their lives to working to fix it and has given up significant security and other sort of superficial assets in order to pursue it, that has been extremely persuasive, right? To that end. The short answer is, listen, regardless of anything, you think it's broken, he thinks it's broken, he has a history of trying to work on it, and he's the only person in the race day one who commands a tremendous amount of voice because of the history, and everybody there already knows him. So you're not sending a freshman congressperson in who's just going to sort of work their way up the ranks. You're loud on arrival, and you get louder from there. I saw let me go over here, and then you've been going.
I know.
I'm over here, and then I'm over there, and then I'm coming back to you. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask you a softball question I think is really important for people to understand. Ranked choice voting, explain what it is, explain how you think you can get there, and how did you help with the initiative in Maine?
Okay. Do you guys hear the questions about ranked choice voting, which is one of the other? So I talk about gerrymandering, I talk about campaign finance. The way campaigns work right now, because we have a choice, Trump versus Hillary, or me versus Stefanik, or it doesn't matter who the two people are. It creates an incentive where the cheapest and easiest way to win a political election is to destroy the other person. So you raise political money, and then you use your political money to destroy the other person, and then you win your job. It's lesser of two evils voting. We saw it in the presidential election. Hillary was like, I'm going to win, not by running for a lot, but by running against Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, I'm going to win, not for running for a lot, but because I'm running against Hillary Clinton. They were both betting on the other. We had the two least popular presidential candidates in American history running against each other. That is the end game of lesser of two evils voting.
Least popular and mistrusted. Most mistrusted.
Both.
Both of them.
Which is, again, what more evidence you want of a broken political system? So there's a group that has been working for debate access. So right now, the two political parties control access to the presidential debate stage. And the only reason Ross Perot even got on the debate stage was because they went to both Bush and Clinton and asked them if they would be willing to do it. Bush thought having Ross Perot there would help him and hurt Bill Clinton. Clinton thought having Ross Perot there would hurt Bush and help him, so they both agreed to it. But even for Perot, they created an exception to the actual debate access rules because he wasn't actually at the threshold, because the thresholds are set deliberately inaccessible. Those same people approached me and they said, listen, we're going to run a campaign called More Choice, More Voice as a ballot measure in Maine to shift to ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is, this primary is a classic, perfect example for it. I wish we could do it for this primary. So instead of having to say, who do you want to have represent you of the 6 people that are in the primary, and you got to pick which one. You're all going to vote line 3, by the way. We're line 3 on this thing, just so you know. But instead of having to pick those types of things, you would say, you know, whoever. We'll use the presidential election. Bernie Sanders 1, Jill Stein 2, Gary Johnson 3, Hillary Clinton 4, Donald Trump 5, or Hillary Clinton 1, whatever it is.
Right.
When you do that, you eliminate the incentive to run against somebody else. You force the political candidates to run for things. And when you shift the incentive to force them, because what happens is, so let's say Trump and Hillary are eating each other up, and this is not a great example, but what ends up happening is, let's say Clem and I are running against each other, okay? And it's vicious, right? And he's saying stuff about me, and I'm saying stuff about him, and we're writing letters to the Glens Falls newspaper, and I'm telling lies. I'm like, he didn't even need more green jacket. It wasn't even green jacket day, you know, this guy. And what ends up happening is I destroy Clem's reputation, and he comes in number 5 in the ranked choice voting layout, but I end up coming in number 4 because you're like, well, Dylan is a jerk because he spent all this time calling Clem a bad guy. So now I'm out because I wasted all my time vilifying Clem. I may have taken Clem out, but we're both out. So the only way you win is to run 4 things. And it's a revolutionary shift because the negative campaigning goes away. It's actually staggering in terms of people think we got to do all these things, and sometimes you just got to when you're engineering a huge system that's high horsepower. Sometimes you just need to tweak a couple of valves, and the whole system reroutes itself. And ranked voting is one of those systems that has a tremendous amount of that influence. The moral to the story is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in Maine have been at their throats almost as much as any 2 states in the country forever, hate each other, never agree on anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. More choice, more voice, ranked choice voting passes in Maine. And for the first time in the history of Maine, the Democrats and Republicans get together and file a lawsuit.
So they work together.
They work together to make sure that they didn't, because once you go right, anyway, so.
Can you give an example? Burlington has it, right?
Of ranked choice voting?
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I know they do it in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I know
can you
that
give
some
us
of the
a
cities.
real,
Minneapolis is the one that I know that has been most aggressive in doing it, and Maine now has it. It went to the Supreme Court.
I would sort of like to see a pattern over time. I mean, I
Yeah?
read
No, for
about
sure.
it, and they have some places in Europe too
Yeah.
that have it in
Yeah.
town, in county.
But like this primary is a perfect for it,
Yeah, I do.
right? So because as opposed to being like, and maybe you got to go because I got this defect, but I can still be your number 2, right? And that still has value or whatever. So I think I'm going to be your number 1. I think I'm going to be in there number 1.
Dylan, have you always been a Democrat?
Since 2000. No, I haven't. I registered as an independent, and then I registered as a Democrat in 2005. I was an independent before that. So, however long. How long is that? 13 years. Yeah. No.
Okay. I have, this is an observation and then perhaps a question that may not have an answer. Okay.
My favorite kind of
So
question.
I have heard people refer to this race as a local race. I don't happen to agree. It's a national race, as far as I'm concerned, to be honest with you.
Well, it's a federal office,
Right.
so by definition.
But I have heard people refer to it as a local race. So that's my observation.
Yeah.
My question is, so
regarding whether it's national or local.
Right.
Wouldn't worry. Who cares?
Yeah.
I think for all the things we can devote our attention to, that's one you don't care about. That's what I would really say. You know, like we have an opportunity. We are running a campaign right now that has a lot of horsepower and has a lot of clarity for New York 21 around that dashboard, that development, and that voice that can be big and loud and have a lot of clarity and strength on day one. That's a unique opportunity.
What made you come in so late?
Basically, there was no way that I was going to be able. Remember, I started Helical, which is the greenhouse business, and it was going to be impossible for me to walk away from my partners in that business with what I was doing until the end of 2017. So I knew that, and so I was going back and forth with them, and I said, "Listen, I really want to put my hat in the ring in New York 21, but I wasn't in a position. I couldn't get the clearance from my other relationships until the very end of the year." And then through the tax debate, it came in. And then I started going around, and then January for me was spent figuring out, am I too late? And then I called Joe Trippi at one point, and I was like, can this be done? And he's like, absolutely. Now, he doesn't have to do it. So it was easy for him to say. But that's why.
I think those are questions that people.
Yeah,
want to know.
sure. But I think that it's helpful. I think it's important to address that, but I think it's also really valuable every time to remind people what the unique opportunity also is. When you get lost in the circular conversation about why is he late and this, like you're just having a conversation that they want to have that's just kind of muddling around. We're in a situation where we can win this seat. We can bring a real voice into this government. We can really drive reform. We can really boost revenue per cow, revenue per apple, all these
Do you
things.
have the money?
It's a real thing. We have plenty of money, sure. We have plenty of money. What's that?
It takes money.
Yeah, no, that we're fine. Other questions? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I guess this goes back to your observation of the extraction of wealth from
Yeah.
the middle class, essentially. So, I mean, this
Have a seat,
probably
bud.
concerns everybody, but incomes haven't really been increasing for,
Decades.
Decades.
Somebody that did my job as an engineer 30 years ago is essentially making the same amount of money, living a much better life, right? How do we translate this into, how do we make that, I mean, revenue is one thing, but revenue doesn't always translate to
To the person.
So, really,
Right, well, right now the revenue is going to the Vermont cheese barons.
well,
It's not even coming. There's not even one rich person in New York because of that.
Oh, come on,
Right.
be kind to them.
You don't want me to run an anti-Vermont? I was going to run a whole. I'm not going to. We're not running against Elise Stefanik. We're going to run against Vermont.
Nice guys.
No, I'm kidding.
even more than just the district, but I mean on
No,
the
no.
national level too. Like how can we make that transition to a more fair, equitable sharing of
Yeah.
The answer to the question is
the
the answer to your question.
Let's get rid of Republicans.
No,
it's not
that
just
is not
Republicans.
the answer to the question, Sue. It's two wrong answers tonight. One more and you're out. And you're both going.
She's out.
The answer to your question explicitly is tax policy, right? The way you actually
Yeah.
rebalance the way money flows in any economy on the planet Earth is tax policy. The reason why the tax policy debate we just endured was so excruciating is because instead of it being a valid debate based on balancing exactly what you're talking about, which can be done 1,000 ways with 1,000 different tax mechanisms, instead it was done as a way to punish and vilify.
Yeah.
So the actual answer to your question is a tax bill. Now, the only way you're going to have a meaningful tax debate is after you have real leadership step forward to enroll enough people to understand that that's what this is, right? That what this actually is that tax policy is economic destiny. Tax policy is where investment goes. Tax policy is where spending goes. Taxes are either a reward or a punishment for money. And when you punish money, you get less of it. When you reward money, you get more of it. And the punishment and reward is based on how much of it you take. There's no, the most sinister room in American politics is in a specific location that I cannot disclose, in a specific building I cannot discuss, on a specific floor of that building that I cannot refer to, where all of the tax loopholes, carve-outs, and deals are made between special interests and industry.
Now, is
And
it just a matter of fact?
It's not.
Because,
It is not. It is not. But
I mean,
that
just
is the,
not taking more of my money doesn't necessarily make up for the full.
has nothing to do with
100%
taking your
cost of
money.
living increase.
When you have a tax policy that drives an investment culture that creates a driving of that capital into the community as opposed to out. Right now, all the tax rules are take as much money out as much as you possibly can and hide it and marshal it away.
Right.
And so when you have that as the incentive, people are good at doing that. And the computers are like, no problem, here you go. Here's $1 trillion over here and $1 trillion over here. And that's how it works. That same way it can push back out, right? Like think of the economic system, the banking and tax system as a leaf blower. And think of the internet as a horsepower engine, as an engine, right? So it used to be that either money's circulating into the economy or it's coming out of the economy. And the power to the degree to which it goes in or comes out is a function of the technological connectivity. As it stands right now, that technology is being used to remove money rapidly. And if you flip it over, you can push it back down in. It's not a wholesale solution. Another thing that has to remember, there's a bunch of different conversations here, but we could put, I think it's a 0.25% tax on all the wealth in America, a wealth tax, which is nothing, and give every single person in America $100,000 on their 25th birthday, every person, right? And so just in terms of the scale, so don't underestimate the impact of intelligent tax policy on economic inequality. It is the balancing act. Sorry, go ahead.
But your last sentence is exactly the point. You have to show a benefit. And, you know, if you gave universal health care at the same time that you imposed a tax policy that, you know, did many of the things that you're talking about in tax at the upper end, then you have the obvious benefit. It's the discrepancy,
Selective benefits.
Yeah, it's the discrepancy between the two.
Mhm.
You know, somebody sees another.
But let's be realistic. The only thing that we can really bring to the table is an incredible dialogue about every single one of these issues held in public and an incredible advocacy for a laser focus on a couple of things around reform, health, and investment, and putting out a model of representation.
And healthcare, it would
The
be.
real thing that would, remember, the real solution to broken politics is more people in rooms like this having these conversations. And our best case scenario, and Barbara, maybe next time, you can invite a bunch of Republicans.
I tried.
And because
that's
really,
preaching to the choir here.
no, exactly, and the real repair, you know who actually showed up at one of our town halls a few weeks ago? You guys know who Russ Finley is?
Yes.
So Russ ran as a conservative to try to primary
He
Elise.
was at one of the forums.
Yeah, and so he started showing up at my town halls, and he's one of the people who philosophically couldn't be more aligned with us, and ideologically, I'm like, Russ, we can't give everybody bazookas, you know? He said, why not? I'm like, we're not pro bazooka, but if we don't argue about bazookas, we're in pretty good shape. But anyway, so I think that this dialogue is really the opportunity and the message. Remember, there's two kinds of politics. There's transformational politics where you talk about ideas and things that are internally clear and resonant and you feel immediately because they're true. And then there's transactional politics where you cultivate fear and desire in the electorate and then you pander to that fear and desire to accomplish a vote. And what we are dealing in with this campaign, or at the very least aspiring to deal in, is transformational politics where we're dealing in things that are true and things that can be easily adopted by others and have the clarity to then focus on bringing that message to a louder volume in a way that can meaningfully send a message about, remember, we're not going back. We're not going back to Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama. There is no return. But we have incredible power right now to amend from where we are to get to where we would prefer to be. So let's harness all this energy to move to where we want to go. And so that's where I'm at. I'm getting the
I have one
from the
quick
floor,
question.
and then we're done.
Forgive me for saying this, but if you lose this primary, do you have any commitment to a role in the things that you're talking about, even if you're not?
Absolutely.
a
You're saying, am I interested in advocating for economic development in upstate New York in addition to my past 10 years in political reform? Well, remember, I've been on political reform for a decade. I can't get it out of my system. Right? Believe me, it's messed up my life. Okay? And so even if I wanted to get out of political reform, I can't. I got in a decade ago, and it's going to be the rest of my life. So,
I think the more pointed question is, will you support whoever wins the primary?
oh, of course, obviously. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's easy. Of course. But I'm going to win the primary, so it's going to be easy. All right, thank you for the time. And the other thing is,